Okay, I think we are live. Um, Hello everyone. I'm the Incompetent Duelist, and I am joined with my friend Crystron. Say hi, Crystron.
Hey guys, Crystron here.
Okay, and today we're just going to be discussing about Yu-Gi-Oh, its current state, Duel Links, and just generally everything Yu-Gi-Oh. What made us get into this game. How did it affect our childhoods? Thank you for joining the program, and we're going to begin. So, Crystron, how did you get into Yu-Gi-Oh? What introduced you to Yu-Gi-Oh?
Well, I watched the anime Zexal. That was really good. Well, when I was young back then, I really liked pretty much anything, but the Yu-Gi-Oh anime was really awesome. But when I truly got into Yu-Gi-Oh was when I played Yu-Gi-Oh Dueling.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I really got into the card game itself.
Mm-hmm. But the interesting
How
thing
about you,
is,
Bruce?
the interesting thing is, I'll be surprised for like someone our age. Normally, people say, "Oh, they start off with GX." Well, I started off with GX. With the E heroes, the elemental heroes, and just Jaden Yuki being, such a cool character. I think that's what really inspired me to really pick up the game. Um, I think my first deck was an E hero deck, if I let's remember. Yeah, Flame Wingman was my go-to card. It was basically my main card. So what about you? What would you say was your first deck?
My first deck that I picked up in IRL was Blue Eyes, a Blue Eyes structure that I bought.
Mm, mm.
That's how I started off my little thing in the real life with Yu-Gi-Oh.
In TCG. But right now, many players are, you know, for previous people who used to play the game and want to try and get back into the game are having some concern that, it's harder for them to get into the game with the new summoning mechanics, um, with the general layout of the field, and with the competitive scene right now, it's harder for new players to join. Um, do you think that Konami should really focus on, toning down the competitive scene to focus on the returning players or the casual duelists? What's your take on that?
Well, it's true that the game has become very complicated.
Mm,
I've seen how it's grown, even though I've joined pretty new to Yu-Gi-Oh, but I understand how it has risen with its new mechanics.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
I have to agree, it is pretty competitive now.
mm,
Konami really is striving for that, um, for the competitive scene to be better and better and better.
mm-hmm.
And it sort of is putting down newer and returning players, putting them down because of how difficult it can be to even to get into the game at first with its new mechanics.
Yeah, I 100% agree with the, and I think Konami is, trying to tone down, the speed of how difficult dueling is, with the addition of dueling, speed dueling, and with Yu-Gi-Oh! Sevens to try and focus on that kind of audience. Um, but people can also have complaints that if the game gets too oversimplified, it's gonna lose its main player base. Because if you look back like 15 years ago, maybe like 10, 15 years ago, the players, you know, the age group ranged from like maybe like 10 years old, maybe even less, maybe from like 7 or 6 to like around 10 or 12. But now we're seeing adult players because the game is too complex to understand. Okay, you can't take a 7-year old to just simply play this game. So Konami did a really good thing with Yu-Gi-Oh! Sevens. People may not like Yu-Gi-Oh! Sevens. I personally do not like Yu-Gi-Oh! Sevens. I just don't like
I
the
don't like Yu-Gi-Oh!
animation.
Sevens.
But I think the good thing that Konami did was just trying to reintroduce, that new player base. Okay, to try and simplify that player base and to try and make it easier for kids to learn this game. Again, with the addition of Master Rule 5 now, Master Rule 4 was very limiting. Because you had to special summon in the main monster zones using link arrows.
that was very limiting for other type of strategies that didn't more focus on link summoning, that would rather have focused on fusion summoning or synchro summoning. I think that might have sort of died, made the game sort of die out in popularity because of how it affected other type of strategies that other people love.
Mm. And what else? Oh yeah. So in terms of you know how the anime has progressed over time, we've seen that we've got really mature Yu-Gi-Oh protagonists in the past few years now. We've had, if we're gonna exclude Jaden and Yugi, and if we were gonna look at Yusei, Yuma, even I would actually argue that Yuma is a mature protagonist because
He definitely
because
is
yeah,
really a
definitely
grown character.
he does grow. I
Probably
mean,
one of the best characters when it comes to character growth, I think.
hmm and Zexal does a really good job at foiling the watchers because at first Zexal may appear to be this fun, light-hearted dueling story. I mean, it's going to remind people of GX or maybe DM, but later on, as it progresses, it becomes some really dark story. I mean, people literally die within the anime. I mean, yeah,
A
they
lot of
literally
people,
die. A
actually.
lot of people die within the anime, and this really adds to really good character development for Yuma. But I think my favorite anime so far, I mean, in the Yu-Gi-Oh series, is 5Ds. With Yusei Fuda. I know your favorite character is Jack Atlas, right?
I love Jack Atlas.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see that dynamic, especially early 5Ds, between Jack Atlas and Yusei Fuda. That rivalry, and I think Yu-Gi-Oh does a really good job. Um,
Yu-Gi-Oh really with Jack Atlas and like you say, they really do revive that sort of rivalry that was between Yugi and Kaiba. It sort
and
of gives you that feel of like, it's not just like about saving the world, it's more about,
mm,
fun, pride,
mm.
winning over this, I guess.
and another thing is that with other protagonists, I mean, GX as well. We had in DM we obviously had Seto Kaiba and Yugi. I mean, in GX we could argue that it was between you know, I mean, three. I mean, Jaden practically had three, maybe four rivals. I mean, we can think of, you know, we can think of Ash the Phoenix. We can think of the Chaz. We can think of, you know, um, Zane. We can think of
Zane.
Jesse Anderson. And yeah, I think that's what really makes Yu-Gi-Oh a really interesting show to watch. But back to the actual discussion. Um, yeah, with players in the TCG, I think Konami has to really provide a balance between
Yeah.
competitiveness and casualness in the TCG because the card game right now is insanely fast. I mean, you can literally, you know, lose a duel within 2, 3 turns. But if you look back around like 5 years ago, or maybe even more actually, if you look back 10 years ago, duels can range from like maybe 10 turns, maybe even more. you know, and players will regard that as more fun. So, what do you think Konami should do? Should Konami stop, printing cards like Nibiru, cards like, Called by the Grave, cards by like Ash Blossom Joy Spring? Should they really limit their production on those cards, or should they focus on, trying to make the dueling scene more faster, or should there be some kind of balance? What's your take on that?
Well, it's sort of to fight off that
Mm,
sort of fast feel of the game. They're sort of, I would say, like they're like the necessary evil of Yu-Gi-Oh. Kind of like in Duel Links, I'd say Lava Golem. I
yeah.
hate Lava Golem, but he's sort of that necessary evil to get rid of
Mm.
like monsters that simply some decks just struggle to get rid of.
Mm. And
And
speaking of duel links, actually, with the casual players, it's a really good way to reintroduce former players to the game because it's a more simplified version of the game essentially, and it's pretty easy to get. You don't need to
It's
go.
it feels
Yeah.
like it's like Yu-Gi-Oh! Reborn, I guess you could say that, because
Mm,
it just started off really simplistic and it's sort of going towards that TCG style, of course,
mm,
but with its own, play style and
yeah.
board, of course.
Yeah. And I think if we were to argue that, I think Duel Links was essentially the saving grace of Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, if let's just imagine that Duel Links was
Yeah,
never invented. Let's say
I
speed
haven't
duels were
really
never
played that
invented.
much TCG.
Yeah, yeah, I know that you're fairly new. I've
I
been
haven't played
playing
that much
since.
TCG, but played a lot of Dueling, so I loved that game. So,
Mm, yeah, and it's really good. It's really easy. It's very simple to learn, especially on Duel Links. I mean, but then again, people can make the argument that being too oversimplified could be, if people want to try and hop back in TCG and use that Duel Links knowledge, it's going to be very, weird for them to adjust to that new change. Um, so do you think Konami should really
it is weird
focus?
in the sense that it is more, I believe it is, believe it more. I think if you play Dueling, sure, the game of TCG will be a bit more complicated
Yeah.
with summoning condition, summoning mechanics,
Hmm.
and like everything else that like goes in. It's a more different environment in TCG than it's in Duel Links. But I believe that Duel Links is also really great for getting you introduced to the basic mechanics of the game far more easier.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's far more easy and more understandable because, well, basically, the game teaches you, and basically you can learn from your mistakes rather than trying to read through card effects and like trying to ask your opponent what did you went wrong.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there has to be some form of, simplicity when we're in the game. I mean, we can't just have it overcomplicated because, um, eventually us as players, we're going to get old. I mean, there's going to be a day whether we like it or not, and I really don't like to think about that, but we're going to leave this game someday, and the new generation of duelists are going to take over.
I
Um,
find it very hard to see you leave this game.
yeah, I'm literally going to be playing it till I'm an old man, but yeah, but the new generation of duelists will take over, and Konami has to introduce some kind of environment where they feel comfortable with, and it's easier for them to pick up the game because if we keep going on at this rate, if we keep adding more, complicated mechanics, if we keep, making it difficult for these new players to join, eventually there's gonna come a time where this game will die. And I really don't like to think about that, but I think Konami is trying to make the right steps with Duel Links. So do you think Konami should really you know focus on their games? It could be Duel Links, for example, Legacy of the Duelist, YGO Pro. Should they focus on games like that and really put their attention on that, or and leave the TCG? I mean, they can still focus on the TCG, but not as much. Or do you think there should be some kind of balance? Or do you think they should focus on the TCG more and then less on games like Duel Links or Legacy of the Duelist? So I'd like to hear your opinion on that.
I can't deny that they shouldn't stop focusing on well, they should of course do things for each and every aspects of their games. They
Mm,
should do for Duelings and they should do for TCG, but I think
mm,
there will be more of that focus towards the digital side of Yu-Gi-Oh now,
mm.
since it's more accessible there, and you don't really have to go anywhere to play the card game. You can just play it in your room or wherever you can play it at.
Yeah, and I
Makes
mean
it
it is,
easier for people all around the world to access this game.
mm, and it's funny because the reason why it's gonna be easier is because one, you don't have to pay. Well, I mean, you can pay, but you can be free to
There is
play.
that option.
You can be free to play, but you can't necessarily be free to play in TCG. No, you have to purchase structure decks. You have to purchase, different
Right.
accessories, booster packs, to try and amplify your deck. And the only way you can really, I say, play for fun. You can't really play for fun in TCG. You play the meta, and the meta is very expensive to build. We look at cards. We look at the value of
Very
different
expensive.
cards.
Yeah, I agree.
Like Nibiru. We look at things like Phantasme. We look at things like different cards that can really make it difficult to build a deck. So I think Duel Links is Konami's heading in the right direction. Um, but the thing is that we have to be careful with corporations like these because they can potentially manipulate their player base, by adding microtransactions or by adding different ways to get money from the player without them knowing. So it's kind of like a half-half situation. So there needs to be some form of balance between the technological side of Duel Links and the actual TCG in real life side of Duel Links. But yeah, I think they are trying to do a good job in that. But Konami just has to pay more attention to their player base. Um, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I would like to say that as much as I agree that I think Unix is somewhat more better when it to accessibility than TCG.
Mm,
Of course, the game is sort of like the real life where like you have to get cards with money,
mm,
and in order to be the best, you're gonna have to get the best cards, which sometimes can result in giving your points up to Konami. I personally don't play Dueling, so I haven't paid a single dime for the game, and I'm still enjoying it, which is a great thing to say about the game. Of course, you don't have to pay money to enjoy the card game, but it, but if in terms of competitiveness, if you want to be competitive in the game,
mm,
it really Konami really does sort of in a way force you to get those best cards
mm. And
with money
yeah,
to
with money, yeah.
be somewhat effective against the meta.
So I think Konami, I think with the Master of Five edition, again, like I said, Konami did a really good job because now you can focus on cards that we deem as less powerful, but these cards are easier to use. For example, um, with the new seventh road archetype being introduced, seventh road magician, very similar to Dark Magician, and it plays very similar to OG Dark Magician, which old players are familiar with. I mean, in the anime, there is a lot of normal summoning. You rarely see negates. You rarely see special summoning from the extra deck. And the very interesting thing is that you can only there's like a boss monster. So let's say for example, this it's something like I think a legendary monster, but you can only summon. You can only have one copy of that monster within your deck, and it's up to the player to try and bring that one legendary monster, which should be easier to do than essentially special summoning your whole extra deck onto the field. Um,
Or I suppose.
but yeah, I mean it's very impractical in TCG, but in terms of you know rush dueling, I think it's pretty impressive what they've done to try and engage this new audience. Um, but yeah, I mean personally, I really don't play rush dueling, but I think it's got a lot of potential. I think it's got some potential.
It could be like a great sort of way of getting the children into the game rather than getting them into the TCG style, big boards with like lots of summoning mechanics. They'd rather play a game where it's more simplistic for children, and then the children, of course, if they really get into the Yu-Gi-Oh
Hmm.
card game, then they can just learn over time with the other mechanics of how the actual Yu-Gi-Oh works. That's just
Yeah, that's fine. That's absolutely valid. I think yeah, I think Konami also needs to work on not only just focusing on the card game. It'd be interesting to see what they do with this huge lore. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be cards. I mean, yeah, sure, that's what Yu-Gi-Oh is based on, but it'd be interesting to see if they could develop a game, from some of the lore. For example, like it'd be interesting to see an e-hero, you know, e-hero storyline in the game, or a dark magician storyline from the game. Um, if you understand what I mean, like something within those small individual universes that make up this, amazing card game. Um, but also, let's just discuss about, why do you think, what do you think your favorite Yu-Gi-Oh anime is? Why, you can try and justify that. And what do you think?
It's kind of a tough one to be honest. I don't want to. Well, there's some really good Yu-Gi-Oh animes like 5Ds. I could even say Zexal. I know a lot of people hate Zexal. I kind of enjoyed Zexal, but I'm gonna say 5Ds because it sort of took that more darker tone. It's as like 5Ds felt like it was growing up
Mm,
like the children that were watching it as well. The
mm.
children that watch ZX could have been like you, of course. You were 6 or 7, right?
Yeah, around
And as
7 years
you
old.
grow up, the anime grows up with you and sort of you know felt like a road trip
Mm,
of some sort of where like as you grow you get more mature and the anime gets more mature as well.
mm,
But
mm,
of course Konami is trying to introduce new players or just children to the game since it
mm,
is a children's card game.
mm,
But like 5Ds really was the the I think the best anime that Konami had produced for
mm,
Yu-Gi-Oh because of how it balanced its characters development with the story, the plot, the
mm,
sort of grim environment that they lived in,
mm,
the atmosphere of it all was just I think that was as good as it could have gotten.
mm. And yeah, I agree. I 100% agree because, um, yeah, five Ds. It was really it's really interesting to take a look at the world of New Dominant. I mean, literally, first episode, we literally see 5Ds getting nuked. With the reversal incident, the whole of New Domino gets nuked, and it gets built by these rich corporate elitists, right? That separate Domino. So there's satellite and Domino. There's the poor side, right? And then there's the rich side, and I think it's really interesting to see that it doesn't really stray away from in real life. I mean, we see so many examples of that kind of environment being displayed today. But it's just really interesting to just see how it can relate to the real world. And but I have to say that one of the most relatable characters is probably I'm not sure, but probably Jaden. Um, he kind of resembles us as children. We're irresponsible. We're very naive to the world. We think everything is, fun and games. But later on, after he develops after season three, um, we can see his more mature side coming out. I mean, he is practically what, almost 16, maybe approaching 17, and it's interesting to see him not only grow as a duelist but grow as a person. But that's just my take. I think Jaden is definitely one of the most interesting um, Yu-Gi-Oh MCs. But I think Yuma was kind of over the top. I mean, don't get me wrong, that his character development was really good, but with the excessive amount of deaths, I mean, pretty much everyone getting disintegrated like literally every episode was kind of a stretch. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I still think it's a decent Yu-Gi-Oh. I just don't think that Yuma is, you know, the best main protagonist, but I'll definitely say that his development was amazing. Um, but yeah, that's just my take on Yu-Gi-Oh. Um, do you have anything else to add? Maybe?
Well, I think that Yu-Gi-Oh does a really good job of sort of showing ourselves in like the protagonists, as you said. Like
Mm,
as Jaden like grows up, he gets more mature and sort of shadows us as we grow up. We also get more mature,
mm,
and that's giving you the point that Jaden really is probably the best relatable character of
mm,
the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise.
mm. Yeah, I agree. I agree. And his deck was really memorable too. I mean, GX was practically created to. I mean, fusions have always been in the game. They've been in the game since DM,
So
but
I think.
it's been in the game since DM. But it's really expanded on that fusion mechanic, and it's what really made the anime so nostalgic to many of us watchers and previous duelists and people who are returning back into the game. Because don't get me wrong, DM wasn't bad, but the cast wasn't as impactful, if you understand what I mean. To Jaden,
Well, I
everyone,
don't think it felt that colorful.
yeah,
The personalities they all sort of felt
because,
same.
yeah,
Samey.
I mean, everyone was unique. Um, you know, from the get go, we get people like Chaz, very unique character. We get people like Alexis, Zane, Cyrus. The relationship between Cyrus and Zane was really, really, really done well. It was really done well, and I really respect Konami for implementing that kind of dynamic relationship. Um, the relationship between Kaiba and Yugi, I think, will is one of the best dynamics. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, 5Ds has Jack Alice and Yusei, but the the impact, the disgrace that Kaiba felt in the first episode, I mean, still carries on even till DSOD. And I think that's what I really like about the the anime of DM. I think that's what I really like about that relationship, that rivalry. I think that's probably one of the best rivalries, if not the best rivalry in Yu-Gi-Oh. But yeah, that's just me. What do you think? What do you think is the best rivalry in Yu-Gi-Oh?
Well, I would say maybe that in the rivalry between Yugi and
Mm,
rivalry, of course, Yu-Gi-Oh does the animes and the other animes that go after the end do try,
mm,
and I think like the rivalry between Yusei and Jack sort of ignites that sort of
yeah,
his rivalry.
yeah, I understand. Um, and the thing about Vrains as well, like we've been talking about, the main four. But if we were to factor in Vrains, it feels very realistic in terms of their dueling style, and I think that's also something that players can also relate to, especially TCG players, because it feels very realistic. We can see the use of MR4, but then again, I feel like Vrains can sometimes just be an ad for just MR4. I think that was what really let down Vrains. The overuse of everywhere you go, it's just link, 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 link. It was so blatant, like it literally just felt like an ad throughout the whole anime. But I'm not saying the anime is necessarily bad. I just think it could have been better. Um, but yeah, I think that's just my take on Yu-Gi-Oh! In a whole. I think that's just my take. Anything else?
I haven't really watched all of Reigns, but I do have to admit that the first like arc of it,
Mm,
where the main character was fighting the Knights of Hanoi.
Yeah, yeah,
But definitely wasn't bad in terms of plot, but I think in terms of all the characters that were associated to it was there was really a lack of progression for them,
mm,
or at least I think like the worst progressed character in which was supposed to be one of the main characters was Blue Angel.
yeah. The
I cannot
trickstars.
think of like any character like I know the anime tries to make you like her in some way, but the anime just keeps to remind me of how much of a credible character she can tend to be, and
Mm,
really annoying as well.
yeah,
As I said,
yeah. I'll be sure to
I
not
haven't
like.
really watched Power Rangers, so that could change, of course.
Yeah, I'll be sure to like not provide any spoilers for those watching, and
You
for
better
you,
not.
of course. But yeah, I think that's just our take on Yukia. So yeah, we're gonna conclude the stream. I think we're gonna conclude the stream. It's been awesome having you here.
Yeah,
Thank you for joining. Thank everyone for joining. This is the Dueling program. I think we could upload maybe Wednesday. I think we can do. Nah, maybe not Wednesday. Maybe Thursday. I think. So stay tuned for our Thursday video. Again, I would heavily appreciate it if you guys check out my YouTube channel. I'll be sure to link that later on. It's the same as my Twitch channel, and I'll be sure to. Everyone should check out the YouTube About page, and it has our Discord server where we can just discuss anime in general. And it'll be nice to have your inputs, not just me and Crystron over here. But yeah, it's just been fun having you, and thank you all for coming. Thank you for the new follower, and I'll see you guys later. Thank you, Crystron.
thank you for
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you, and goodbye, guys.
having me.